So much space on the computer, huh? Okay, so remember that you should be starting with about 1.5 to 2 pounds of clay. Okay, I know that bowls come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, but this is kind of an ideal size and amount for most people to learn how to center and open. Okay, too small, you feel like, oh, it's going to be easier for me to center. It's kind of strange. It has an opposite effect. So remember to think about how your body is aligned with the wheel, right? If you're taller, you might choose one of the taller wheels. If you get to class and you no longer have an option, you still have ways to kind of compensate, right? The thing that you really want to keep in mind is that your head should be right about over the center of the wheel. Okay, if you're back here, you've lost a lot of your ability to use your upper body to keep that clay steady. Okay, so you want to be leaning over so that your head is right over the center. And then my back, you want to try and keep your back relatively straight. So if you're over the top, but you're hunched over, might mean that your stool is too high for the wheel, right? So some of these stools with the blue tops do adjust. These don't. So your standard metals. Then you've got those funny guys over there that you have to stand on the bottom ring, jerk up the seat, and then you can push it down to a lower level. All the kinds of things in here. Okay, so just remember that you have options, and really a good physical stature is just as important as being able to center and wedge well. Okay. All right, so we want to make sure that we take this ball of clay. We want to make sure that our wheel head this is okay. It's got a little bit of clay to it, but it's tacky. If it's wet, like if it has even just that much water down, when you throw the clay down, it will scoot off. So not everyone got their toolkits, but make sure that you get your name tag over there and then find an available shelf. So an available shelf is any shelf that does not have a bucket and a yellow towel. So grab a bucket, grab a yellow towel, and claim your space. And remember that if you're on the top half of the shelf, that includes this shelf, that shelf, and the top shelf. And if you're on the bottom, it includes this one, and the bottom shelf. Okay, so use all 3 of your shelves, you'll need it. Okay, so you want to take that clay and you want to really slap it down. Now, I'm not a pro. My aim is fairly terrible. If I go ahead and start like this, I'm just giving myself a headache, right? Remember that you can scoot the clay by cupping it, okay, so that it's more in the center of the wheel. All of these little things that I show you, they're really easy to forget, but they can really help you if you remember. Okay, and then we need to have some water. And remember that if I'm positioned over the wheel head, I'm using my entire upper body so that I'm keeping the clay steady, right? It's not necessarily about pushing or, I'll use the word force and I use the word pressure. I try not to use the word push, right? Because push indicates that there is one direction. And when you push one direction, it knocks the clay off center more often than not. So there's pressure. And again, lots of different ways to do this, but you're going to have some pressure from the top, some pressure from the side, so that they both help to control each other and control that now it's soft, control this soft material that is now in the space provided by your hands, right? Try to remember that, because what people do more often than not is they feel like they don't get it and they constantly switch their hands, where their hands are. And that's actually not going to help you at all. What you want to do is you want to kind of find a way that you like to hold your hands. So I've talked about why I like to hold my hands this way. It's mostly about keeping my wrists as straight as I can, right? To preserve my poor old bones with this occupational hazard that I have. But I also feel like it gives you a lot of ability to turn your fingers down and make contact with that wheel head. Okay, remember that if you don't, or if you're doing this, where you're using the soft part, it's harder to control. The clay can push out, right? With my fingers, they can be really rigid. So if I'm using this, which is okay, and some people will hook fingers. I mean, there's all kinds of things that people will do. And, for some people they work, for some people they don't. But usually you'll end up with this kind of smear of clay into the wheel head. And if this is not centered, this little pad, which I hate to tell you, where the clay meets the wheel is usually the hardest part to center, right? Because you really have to think about turning your hand or making sure that the clay is centered right at the wheel head. It's a lot easier. And then you feel success because you're like, I centered it, and you centered the top part. Okay, but you got to center all the way down to the wheel head. And so if this is uneven at all, it just kind of exacerbates the problem as you continue to try and center on top. I keep my sponge in my hand because it helps me to position my fingers so that they're optimal, right? It's getting the most force from my fingers this way. Again, this is how I like to do it. If something else works for you, that's totally fine. I'm going to go ahead and wheel wedge. Now this is where I do mostly use like this part of my hand, and I'm squeezing up and I follow the clay up. Okay, so that's key. You don't just want to squeeze and keep your hands down here. You want to squeeze and go up. And here you probably will end up with that. I used to call it a skirt. But you might end up with that clay kind of just, you know, smushing into the wheel head. And so I think the idea here is that now I've got a smaller surface area that's more manageable. And the whole thing got a little bit more centered as I did that. It's not perfect right now, right? And then as I push down, the clay expands. It's going to do that anyway. And that's what this hand is here to do. And so this hand is here as the clay gets smushed down. And this hand is helping to control the outside contour, right? The outside contour is this part, the shape. And then this is usually where I turn my fingers down. I don't have fingernails, friends. If you have fingernails, you'll be clipping them, I'd imagine. Or the wheel will do it for you. If at any point you're like, you know, you've really got like a sore spot or something, there's probably a different way you should be centering, okay? You shouldn't have any area that is so rubbed that it becomes kind of raw, okay? So if that happens to you, there's something about the way you're doing it that we want to correct, okay? My hand does sit on the wheel head, but it's not pushing down, right? And the clay really is not so gritty. It's got a little bit of grit to it, but it's not so gritty that it should actually, you know, rub your hands raw. So there's something we're going to want to correct if that's happening to you. Okay, so again, we just push towards the center, push up. Here I do have the clay has a little bit of an indent in the middle. This is kind of okay. If that does happen though, you really want to push on just off the center of it so that the center comes up. Some air bubbles in there. Sometimes this wheel wedging can help. I can feel it. It's like this huge bump in there. And of course, when you pop the air bubble, there's not a little clay fairy that puts clay where that air pocket was. You've just got a big dent now in your pot. So that's part of why we don't want air bubbles. Plus, it also, the clay doesn't move the same. Like air doesn't move the same when it's trapped in a bubble the way that clay does between your fingers, right? And so you'll hit that and you might actually inadvertently dent your pot or throw it off center. Okay, so centering, good. There we go. You can do this, like I said. What we really want to see is low and wide, okay? When you wheel wedge, it does become more like a cylinder. It gets higher than it is wide, but that's more of a quick technique, right? If you're trying to center tall and high, it's really hard to make, you know, kind of make all of that clay cooperate at the same time. Okay, so we want to center low and wide. It can be flattish on the top, but again, you really only want that center point to be the highest point. Okay, so open it. Now we're going to make bowls and y'all are going to do this. So get used to the idea of cutting things in half. It's called practice. It's called skill building. So think about, you know, reps that you would have to do if you played an instrument, or all the times that you die and you have to start over in a video game, right? Part of that is muscle memory. Your fingers start to know, oh, at this point I need to get rid, you know, it all just flows at some point, but sometimes it takes a little bit to get there. Like Angry Birds, that's one of my stupid. Okay. So we make the bowl, right? This is what it's going to end up looking like when we make the bowl, though. I did a little drawing on the board. So for those of you in Zoom, I'm not going to touch my clay. I'm not going to touch my computer right now for obvious reasons, but I'll make sure that I take a look at that in a minute. When we throw the bowl, we leave a lot of clay, especially at the beginning. You can start to use more of that clay. You don't have to keep all that clay down there because you'll get better at moving the material and controlling the material. But early on, we really leave a lot of clay down here to support the curve. Okay, this curve is what we would call more of a self-supporting curve. It's pretty straight and kind of flared out. The wider open you get, so this is a really kind of low and open, shallow kind of bowl, right? This one, if you know, for beginners, you might have left clay way out here. So as you're throwing it, you know, you're leaving this clay here so that it's supporting this curve right here. Otherwise it will flop. So if you start to open your bowls and they continuously flop, you're not leaving enough of a clay base to support the curves that you're trying to make. Okay, again, that's something that you'll learn early on, and you'll recognize that there's a thing that we have to work on. So just make sure that you're aware of those things you need to work on and then talk to me about them. I did arrange with the tutoring office the ability to request that all of you spend at least one tutoring session, either as a small group or one-on-one with them or with me during the first 2 weeks of class. So that's going to kind of start this week. So it's really into the third week of class. But I'm interested to see if that helps to mitigate some of the problems that I see just kind of constantly happening over the course of the semester. And of course, as you continue to feel the need, then you go ahead and you can just book them yourself. Okay. The tutor link is right on the Moodle page, very top. My office hours is up there. And then there is a Zoom link. And I just want to take a second to say that the Zoom link is there, but unless I am aware that you're planning to attend via Zoom, I probably am not going to be carrying around my computer the whole time. Okay, so please communicate with me if you need to attend via Zoom and we can make that happen. But under most circumstances, I'm probably not going to have my computer around with me. Okay, so here we go. So we got to open this puppy. Now you have to keep the whole thing on center. You've got it on center and you're going to be like, wow. And for some of you, it's going to take like 10 minutes, like the first 20 times to get it centered. And you're going to be like, how long is it going to take me to make a pot? When it takes me 10, don't worry. Every single time you do it, you'll do it a little bit quicker, a little bit quicker, and a little bit quicker. Yes.
How can we like check to see if it's centered?
Well, you have to look and feel. And that's where it's hard for me to teach that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you do. So that's pretty obvious that it's off center. And you remember that I talked about going too slow. Now, again, that's pretty obvious that it's off center, but it becomes less obvious when you're spinning the wheel slowly. When you spin the wheel more more fastly, when you spin the wheel faster, you'll feel it, you'll see it. Okay. So it is kind of hard for me to say it's centered when.
Mm-hmm.
And even this, like, it's got a little bit of a wiggle to it. And that can even, this is kind of you can do a fork here. You can keep going and you might be able to rectify that a little bit later, but not very much later. Or you can keep persisting and try to work through that. So that for some of you, you're going to get to here and you're going to be like, I'm centered. And I'll be like, oh, almost. And you'll be like, oh, you just crushed my soul. And I'll be like, I know, I'm sorry. Okay, so I get it. I'm sorry. It's close to painful. But just try to keep persisting through it. Usually the best thing to do is the coning up, the wheel wedging. Because it really gives you you kind of use a little bit more pressure than you do when you're just centering, because you're really trying to move that clay. And if you can get to a point where you're moving that clay like that, then that means that you're going to be able to hold your hands that steady to get it into the place that you need it to be. Okay. It really is just about letting that soft material take the form that's provided by your very stiff and rigid hands. It sounds so simple. I know, again, my apologies. Okay, so here we are, we're centered. There's a lot of clay slop on my hands. I usually don't center like this. So in the next couple, I also talk a lot and I apologize for that also. Anyway, okay, so we want to get the hole in. We don't want to go too deep because then we make a flower pot. We don't want to keep it too thick because then we're not using like as much clay as we really should, and then we'll have to make more clay. because a lot of it's stuck in a place that's just going to get recycled anyway. Okay. To keep the hole centered, this is critical. Remember what I talked about last time. You don't want your fingers here, right? You want your hands, to the best of your ability, to really be around and in contact with the clay surface. Okay, so when I open, I keep my hands wrapped around my centered piece of clay, and I take my thumb, and you can see that I use my other thumb. Now y'all are having trouble, but I just did that. I use this thumb to guide it so that I go straight down. It's really easy. You know, our thumbs do this, some more than others, but it's really easy to have our thumbs kind of skirt into the bottom of the clay wall there. So try your best to keep your thumbs straight. And so I bend it, and then I just watch as I go down. Other people will use two thumbs, and that's perfectly fine. Sometimes if you try to go too fast, your thumbs will like entwine in each other. You'll know if that happens to you, there's one of two things. You're going too fast, and or there's not enough water. And so it's creating friction, and your fingers are kind of twisting onto each other. And some of you have seen this demonstration more than once, and I'm curious, I'm always curious to hear what you picked up this time as opposed to the first time when you're like totally overwhelmed. Okay, so I've got my hole in here and it's straight. If at any point this gets off center, this is a great opportunity though, to take both thumbs and here, yeah, go ahead, just like muscle it into place. But again, you see, I'm not moving my hands a whole lot. I am just getting them into a position where I'm kind of making a donut. I'm not trying to stretch open that bottom, but I'm trying to rectify if my center, if my hole got off center a little bit, this is a way that I can fix that. Okay, how do I know how far down I've gone? Well, my friends, you've got these toolbox that I just like to throw all over the place. Okay, this is called a pin tool. So now you're gonna start bringing a few more tools into the mix. With the pin tool, with the wheel not spinning, you can take your pin tool and send it all the way down through the clay, down to the wheel head. Put your finger on the inside floor. We always call, basically, this is the floor. The inside is called the floor of your pot. Put it on the floor of your pot and don't move it as you pull the pin tool out. And so what's left is basically the thickness of my floor, okay? This is a little thick, but at the same time, it's really easy to make it too thin. And then you don't have any clay to trim, and or you might just cut through it when you cut it off. So somewhere between 1/2 inch to a little bit heavy of 1/2 inch is a good start. And you're like, Bethany, you just put a hole in it. That'll be fine. By the time you start, like you finish throwing it, you've gone over that bottom so many times that it's healed itself. Okay. All right. So here's where handedness, some people kind of cringe. And this is one of the biggest habits that I have to break repeatedly in the course of a semester. Okay. I'm right-handed. I use my left hand to do the pulls, and my right hand is on the outside. Okay, guiding this hand. Okay, the other thing is that you want to have small contact areas. Okay, you will see people showing you how to throw. This is a large surface area. Okay, so if you're using the bulk of your fingertips or the bulk of your hands, you're losing a lot of your ability to control the form and to control the clay as it's going between your fingers. Okay. When I am doing a pull, I pretty much kind of use the tips of these two fingers and like the side knuckle of this. It will look like I'm using a lot more of my hands. And yes, they are around the clay, but what's in contact with the clay is a pretty small amount. Okay. All right. So when we first start, you will draw your fingers kind of towards your thumb and pull up and out at the same time. As you come up towards the top, if you keep going, you're going to end up with a really fine kind of pointy edge. You don't want that. You actually want it to be nice and rounded over and pretty much as thick as the rest of the wall below it. So how do you prevent that? As you come up, you kind of slow down with this hand and you come up and over with your right hand or the other hand. You do something to round over that top edge. Rob keeps threatening to go and get some, they call it like a chamois, for those of you who do cars and stuff. But that chamois will allow you also, you get like just a little thin strip of it, you keep it the whole semester, and you can round over the top edge of your pieces very nicely with that. Okay, and then you always start in the center. So right now it looks like I have a cylinder with a bowl on the on the inside. Yay, I made a bowl. No, you didn't. No, you didn't, not yet. Always start from the center. The reason for that is that it helps to compress, okay? The clay is kind of, it's open. And if you don't take that opportunity to start at the center every time, then you might find that you're getting cracks in the bottom of your vessels, okay? And you don't see those until after you've trimmed it and it's begun to dry. You think you're in the clear and then you flip it over and you see the dreaded S crack. That is from compression, okay? So please, please, I'm not pushing down a lot, right? I'm not pushing down a lot, but I am starting in the middle. And the other thing that that does is if it's off center at all, I don't move my hands until I'm centered from the inside in the middle, and the outside of my fingers out here are centered to one another. Okay, and then I'm starting to use my other hand as an extension of my thumb and come up and out again. Now I'm going much slower in terms of the speed of my hand, right? So you want to be slow and consistent. You want to be seeing what we call throwing rings. You want to see those throwing rings as, you know, pretty close together and pretty evenly spaced. If you're seeing other things, we may have some things that we want to talk about. It might be working for you to go quicker, but if you really want to learn how to control the piece, control that clay, you'll be doing slow, rhythmic, repetitive movements. You can move a lot more clay also, and this is going to sound backwards, but you can move a lot more clay with a smaller surface area of pressure. Any like physics people in the room want to explain how that is? Because I don't know. Or anybody who just wants to take a stab at it? No. Okay, so again, starting from the center. Now, once you kind of get past, especially if you're a beginner, you've never done this before, and you're like, well, I'm doing it. And you're like, okay, that's good. You know, this amount of clay down here is fine for a little bit. But I don't actually need that much clay down there. I need a little bit of clay, but I also, through years of experience, I know what kind of curves can take a certain amount of base, right? So that's just something that you kind of learn, and you'll learn that you don't always have to leave this really thick base, because you end up trimming a lot of that away, and then it goes in the recycling bucket, and then it has to get reprocessed to make more clay. So, you know, if we're running out of clay right at the beginning, it could be because people are like leaving a little bit too much clay down at the bottom. But I'm starting to, again, start in the middle. I'm starting to pull underneath here with my finger. You see that little groove? Okay. So I'm taking that clay and then I'm pulling it up together. And just like I know that there are a lot of different sizes and heights and shapes of bowls, for the purposes of the assignment, once we really get into the mix of things, I want your bowls to have a curved bottom. Okay. We're going to leave flat bottom things. So on the inside, the floor, we're going to leave flat bottom floors to cylinders, which is the next project. So part of this is controlling the clay so that it makes that nice curve on the interior. Okay. Now, one of the last things, once you get to the point where you're keeping your bowls, which isn't until like a week from now, you want to make sure that you don't leave any water on the inside. So one of the last things that you do is you take that sponge, you bring it out, and again, just take that little bit of time to get that water out of there. As it sits on your shelf, if there's water in the bottom, it makes that part of the clay dry slower. Do you all remember what happens to clay when it dries? Shrinks, right? And so that wet part in the middle doesn't shrink, and everything else is shrinking around it, is shrinking at a different rate. And that's usually when cracks start to happen, okay? In addition to the fact that it makes it harder to trim or is softer right in the middle, and you might go through anyway because you'll have to use a different amount of pressure because the clay is a different consistency. Okay, so what I'm looking for when we get to it are bowls that have a curved bottom. I want to see bowls that have a reasonably thick rim. Now, just below this, the clay might be, you know, a little bit thinner than that. But the reason that I don't want a bunch of bowls that go to this kind of point, okay, while that may look aesthetically pleasing, that might look nice, it might be good for an idea, and you know, it's fine if you want to do a couple of them. But understand that a very thin edge like this is going to chip away very easily. And in a community studio like this, as much care as we try to take with everybody's pieces, you all are gonna have to move each other's pieces as well. And so the more delicate that you make something, the more likely it is to get a little bit marred on the way through the process, okay? In addition, usually what this tells me is that you're forgetting that key component of compressing the rim, right? Because if you're compressing the rim, usually you won't end up with an edge like that. And clay can be forgiving, it can be your worst enemy. It can feel like you're winning and it can make you cry on the same day. So just be kind of mentally prepared for that range of emotions. Know that all of your colleagues are going through the same thing. Talk to each other. We should have like a support group for ceramics. I think we might start doing that soon. Anyway, so when you start keeping your pieces, you will take this, you will cut underneath and you will lift them up. But until you get to that point, this is what we're doing, friends. We're just cutting these puppies right in half so we can see how we did. Okay, so I would say this bottom, it's not very round. I would have liked a rounder bottom. Usually my demonstrations though, as I'm talking, I kind of don't do all the things, but really what I really don't want to see is like a flat bottom and straight walls. That is a cylinder, we're doing that next. Do try to have a curve in here. What we're going to be doing is trimming all this stuff away, making little foot right in here. Okay, so when it becomes time, you'll be able to trim that stuff away. You have to wait until it's drier, leather hard, so you can flip it over and not mess up the form. We're looking for fairly consistent thickness in the walls. Like I said, we're trying to see these throwing lines in here that are kind of close to one another. Okay. All right, now I'm going to do it a couple of times without talking. And then class is over. Sorry. You're just centering anyway. You can stay the center. Okay, you can do that where if you take off a fresh piece of clay and you have that bit of clay down there, it actually helps as long as you put it down there hard enough, helps the next piece of clay to stick. Or you can take, oops, you can take your thumb or something and get that extra. So a goal is to be able to center in about a minute or less. Okay. So for some of you, you're not even, it's going to be 5 minutes, it's going to be 7 minutes, 10 minutes. That's okay. It's totally normal. The more that you do it though, right, the quicker that you will get at that. I know I promised I wasn't going to talk. Some might see that I'm slowing the wheel down every time I do a pull. Okay. Wow.
That was fast.
Yeah, I know. Why did I do all that talking before? Okay, one other thing. Did y'all notice that I was leaning, right? As I'm doing my pulls, if my arms are not anchored onto anything, it becomes really hard to make those pulls consistent. It's because I'm leaning on my arm, or sorry, I'm leaning on my leg, which is stabilizing my arm and allowing me to move up the side and have control over the material. Okay, all right, go center. class at 2:30. It's up to you whether you want to stay or go. I understand. But the more practice you get, the better you'll be. All right, friends, so the rest of today's class is just gonna be, people centering and me trying to help them. So I'm gonna go ahead and shut the Zoom off, okay? And hopefully we will see you soon in class. All
Thank
right.
you. Have a nice day. Bye.
Have a good one.